The rain fell like shards of glass that night, cold, endless, and cruel. On a lonely porch, two little girls, Lily and Emma, huddled together, their small hands trembling as thunder rolled above. Their only mistake? Spilling a glass of orange juice. Behind the locked door, their stepmother's shadow flickered, a woman whose heart seemed carved from ice. But destiny was listening. Down that same street walked Sophie, a kind-hearted woman who'd lost everything but compassion. And when she saw the girls, soaked and shivering, she made one call, to Officer Ethan Cole, a man whose only partner was a loyal German shepherd named Ranger. That night, under the storm's fury, three strangers crossed paths, and none of their lives would ever be the same again. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments. And if you believe kindness still changes lives, hit subscribe and stay with us till the end. Wishing you a peaceful day, wherever you are. Rain came early to Cedar Hollow, a small mountain town nestled among pine ridges and frozen creeks in northern Montana. The streets were narrow, cobblestone veins slick with water, and the lamps along Birch Avenue glowed faintly through the mist, like lanterns guiding lost souls home. The smell of damp cedar filled the air, mingling with the faint hum of distant thunder. It was nearly dusk when the storm began to deepen, swallowing the last warmth of the day. At the edge of the Hale residence, a mansion of pale brick and black iron fences, two small girls sat on the front steps, their knees drawn to their chests, their thin uniforms clinging to their skin. Lily Hale, 9 years old, had hair the color of honey and eyes too old for her face. She was quiet, thoughtful, always the one to shield her sister. Emma, her twin by mere minutes, was smaller, softer, with a round face and timid blue eyes that trembled like raindrops on glass. They were identical in many ways, same plaid skirts, same mud-stained shoes, but their souls carried different weights. Tonight, both shivered beneath the same heavy rain, exiled for an accident so small it barely deserved a scolding. From inside the house came the sharp click of heels and the scent of orange perfume. Victoria Hale, their stepmother, appeared in the doorway, a tall woman in her late 30s with dark auburn hair pulled into a flawless twist, her face elegant but cold as polished marble. She had once been a socialite, raised on perfection and appearances, and she carried her bitterness like a perfume, sweet to strangers, poison to those who knew her. The death of her only son years ago had twisted her grief into cruelty, and now discipline had become her only language of control. She stared at the two girls, lips pursed. "You spilled my orange juice," she said evenly. "Actions have consequences." "We're sorry," Lily whispered. "It was an accident." "Sorry doesn't clean the floor," Victoria replied, her tone clipped. "Sit there. Think about what you've done." She turned, heels echoing against the marble floor, and the door closed behind her with a soft but final click. A second later came the metallic snap of the lock. The rain thickened, a slow drumming that grew cruel. Emma rubbed her eyes, her breath trembling in the cold. "Lily, I'm cold." "I know," Lily murmured, pulling her close. "She'll open the door soon." But even as she said it, she knew better. The last time it had taken hours, tonight, maybe longer. Across the street, under a flickering lamppost, a woman paused mid-step. Her name was Sophie Reed. She was 26, a slender woman with chestnut-brown hair that fell messily over her shoulders, and eyes the color of rain clouds. Her old wool coat was too thin for the weather, and her boots were cracked at the edges. Sophie had once worked in that mansion until Victoria fired her 6 months earlier after accusing her of softening the children. Since then, Sophie had lived in a shelter on the outskirts of town, doing laundry and caring for other women's children for food. But she never forgot those two little girls behind the gates, the way they flinched at footsteps, the way they smiled as if asking permission to exist. Now, through the storm, Sophie saw two small silhouettes curled under the porch light, and her heart seized. She dropped her canvas bag and ran through the rain, knees splashing against puddles. "Lily? Emma?" she called out, voice trembling. The girls looked up, startled. Emma blinked through tears. "Miss Sophie?" Sophie fell to her knees, ignoring the cold water soaking through her jeans. "Oh my God, what are you doing out here?" She reached for them, but they shrank back, afraid of being caught. She quickly took off her coat, her only one, and wrapped it around them both. "You'll freeze. Come on, let's get you inside." Emma shook her head weakly. "We can't." She locked the door. Sophie's breath caught. Her hands trembled as she brushed wet hair from their faces. "How long have you been here?" Lily hesitated. "Since dinner." Sophie looked up toward the windows, dark, unfeeling rectangles. "No one's coming?" The girls shook their heads. For a moment, Sophie just sat there, rain running down her face like tears. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out an old, cracked phone. Her thumb hovered over a number she never thought she'd use again. "Who are you calling?" Lily asked softly. "Someone who promised to protect you," Sophie said, and pressed the call. The line rang twice before a man's voice answered. "This is Officer Ethan Cole." Ethan was 38, broad-shouldered with close-cropped dark hair and a face carved by years of sleepless nights. His blue eyes, once bright, now carried the dull reflection of too many late calls and too many lost causes. He was a police officer in Cedar Hollow's small department, honest to a fault, stubbornly compassionate, and quietly lonely. A widower, he had buried his wife 4 years ago after a car accident on a rain-soaked road much like this one. Since then, the only constant in his life was Ranger, his 6-year-old German shepherd, a large black and tan male with intelligent amber eyes, trained for search and rescue. Ranger was calm, obedient, and fiercely loyal. Ethan often said the dog was the one partner who never left. "Officer Cole," Sophie stammered. "It's Sophie Reed. I used to work for the Hale family." Ethan frowned, adjusting his headset as he sat in his patrol truck, rain drumming on the windshield. "Yes, I remember. You filed a complaint last spring, didn't you?" "I did, but they dismissed it. Listen, there are 2 little girls outside that house right now, locked out. In the rain, they're freezing." Ethan's tone shifted instantly. "How long?" "I don't know. An hour, maybe more." "I'm on my way," he said, already turning the key. Ranger barked once from the back seat, sensing urgency. By the time they reached Birch Avenue, the rain had turned to a near curtain, and thunder rolled across the valley. Ethan parked under the gate light and stepped out, his uniform soaked within seconds. Ranger leapt down beside him, nose low, scanning. Ethan's flashlight cut through the storm and landed on the 2 small figures huddled together beneath a coat. "Hey there," Ethan called gently. "It's all right, I'm a police officer." He knelt down, his voice soft. "You must be Lily and Emma, right?" Emma nodded weakly. Lily stared, lips trembling. "We didn't do anything bad," she said. "I know you didn't," Ethan replied. "You're safe now." Sophie stood beside him, her breath uneven. "I tried calling inside, but no one answered." Ethan's jaw tightened. "She won't open that door for me either, I bet." He picked up Lily, light as a shadow, and wrapped his jacket around her. Then he turned to Sophie. "You ride with them, I'll handle the rest." Inside the patrol car, Ranger climbed beside the twins, licking their faces softly. The girls giggled weakly for the first time that night, tiny smiles breaking through exhaustion. Sophie wiped her eyes, whispering, "Thank you, boy." Ethan crossed the muddy yard, boots sinking into wet ground, and pounded on the door. The brass knocker rang through the house. A moment later, Victoria appeared, perfectly composed, a silk robe tied at her waist, hair immaculate despite the storm. "Officer," she said, feigning surprise. "Is there a problem?" "There is," Ethan said evenly. 2 children locked outside. Care to explain that?" Her smile didn't falter. "Discipline, officer. You'd be amazed how effective it is." "Discipline?" Ethan's voice hardened. "Leaving them in a thunderstorm isn't discipline. It's cruelty." "You police think you can judge every parent," she said coolly. "You have no idea what it takes to raise children with respect." "I have no children," Ethan replied quietly, "but I know what it means to protect one." He turned away before anger could cloud his judgment. "I'm taking them to the hospital. You'll receive a welfare report." "You can't just take them," she snapped, but the sound of the patrol car starting drowned her protest. Inside, the girls had fallen asleep against Ranger's fur. Sophie sat beside them, tears mingling with the rain on her cheeks. Ethan glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You did the right thing, Sophie." She nodded weakly. I just couldn't walk by again. The wipers kept their rhythm, steady and patient, as the car disappeared down the winding road, red tail lights slicing through the darkness. Ethan looked at the mirror again. The reflection of two sleeping children, their small hands clutching Ranger's collar. A warmth stirred deep in his chest, the kind he hadn't felt in years. He whispered to himself, barely audible over the rain, "No one will ever hurt you again." Behind them, the Hale mansion stood silent, its windows dark, rain cascading over its cold stone walls. Inside, Victoria Hale stood frozen at the door, her reflection trembling in the glass, unaware that this night, the night she chose cruelty, would mark the beginning of her own downfall. The night after the rescue was long and sleepless. The rain had calmed to a mist over Cedar Hollow, but its echo still clung to the streets, dripping from pine needles and telephone wires. Inside a modest one-story brick house near the police station, Officer Ethan Cole sat at his small kitchen table, watching steam rise from a mug he never drank. Across the room, two small figures slept on the couch wrapped in his old army blanket, and beside them, the German Shepherd Ranger kept silent vigil. His head rested on his paws, ears twitching at every sigh from the girls. Ethan had placed the space heater closer, adjusting it every few minutes. He didn't know what frightened him more, the bruises he'd seen on their arms, or the way they never cried even in their sleep. They were too used to silence, the kind that fills houses where love is conditional. He remembered nights after his wife's accident when silence felt like punishment from heaven. Maybe that was why he couldn't leave them at the station's care unit. He needed them as much as they needed him. At dawn, the girls stirred. Emma, the smaller twin, blinked open her eyes and looked around, her small fingers clutching the edge of the blanket. "Where's Miss Sophie?" she whispered. "She's safe," Ethan replied gently, kneeling beside her. "You can see her soon." Emma nodded, then hesitated. "Are we in trouble?" Ethan shook his head. "Not anymore." Lily, older by a few minutes but always the protector, sat up slowly. "You're a policeman," she said with a strange mix of awe and suspicion. "Will you arrest our mom?" "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I promise you, I'll make sure no one locks you outside again." Ranger lifted his head, letting out a quiet huff as if agreeing. Emma giggled softly and reached to pet his neck. "He's warm." "Yeah," Ethan smiled faintly. "He's good at that. Keeps bad dreams away." As the girls ate the simple breakfast he'd made, scrambled eggs, toast, and hot chocolate, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the caller ID. Captain Miriam Graves, his superior at the Cedar Hollow Police Department. She was in her 50s, short and sturdy with sharp gray eyes, known for her no-nonsense discipline and quiet compassion. A widow who'd lost her husband in the line of duty, Miriam had raised 3 sons on her own. She had the rare ability to be both firm and motherly, a trait that made her one of the few people Ethan truly respected. "Ethan, I read your report," she said through the line, her voice calm but edged. "You took 2 minors into your home last night. You know that's not protocol." "I know," Ethan replied, "but I wasn't about to leave them in the system overnight, not in their condition." "I'm not saying you were wrong," she sighed, "but their stepmother's got money, lawyers, and connections. You need to play this smart. I'll assign a social worker to evaluate them this morning." "Understood. And Ethan," she added, her tone softening, "good job." By mid-morning, a dark blue sedan pulled into his driveway. A woman stepped out, Clara Benson, the assigned social worker. She was in her early 40s, petite and graceful, with auburn hair pinned neatly, and eyes that had seen both kindness and cruelty in equal measure. Years in the system had made her pragmatic, but not hard. She greeted Ethan with a professional nod. "Officer Cole, I understand these are the Hale twins?" "Yes," he said, opening the door. "They've had a rough night." Inside, Clara knelt to the girls' level, her smile warm but cautious. "Hi, sweethearts. I'm here to make sure you're okay." Emma hid behind Ranger, who immediately positioned himself protectively between her and the stranger. Clara chuckled softly. "Well, someone's on guard duty." "That's Ranger," Lily explained. "He saved us." Clara met Ethan's eyes briefly. "So did you, it seems." While Clara took notes, Ethan stepped onto the porch to breathe. The rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp and sweet. From the corner of his eye, He noticed Sophie walking up the path. She wore a faded denim jacket and a borrowed scarf, her cheeks pale from lack of sleep. "You shouldn't have come out in this weather," Ethan said. "I couldn't stay away," she replied softly. "I needed to know they're all right." He nodded toward the door. "They're inside with a social worker. You did the right thing calling me." Sophie looked down. "I thought about walking past again. I almost did. But I remembered what it felt like when no one opened the door for me once." Ethan studied her face, tired but resolute. There was something unspoken there, an old wound she carried quietly. He didn't ask, but she noticed the question in his eyes. "It's nothing," she said, forcing a smile. "We all have our storms." Inside, Clara finished her assessment and stood. "Physically, they're fine for now. Emotionally, that'll take time. I'll file for protective custody. If the mother contests, it'll go to hearing." She paused, looking at Ethan. "You'll likely need to testify." "Count on it," he said. As Clara left, Lily tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "Can we stay here tonight?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "For now, yes, until it's safe." That evening, as the sky blushed with fading gold, the house grew warm with quiet life. Sophie helped the girls bathe and dry their hair, humming a tune so gentle it almost disguised the heaviness in her chest. Ethan cooked soup while Ranger watched, tail thumping softly on the floor. For a fleeting hour, the house didn't feel like a temporary shelter. It felt like something resembling home. But peace was fragile. Around 9, the phone rang again. Ethan picked up, his expression darkening. "Yes, Captain." Through the line came a sharp exhale. "Victoria Hale just filed a complaint. Claims you abducted her children." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. "Of course she did. She's got a lawyer from Helena. They're pushing for an emergency return order. I'll hold them off, but be careful." Sophie, overhearing, paled. "She'll try to take them back?" "Not tonight," Ethan said firmly. "She'll have to get through me first." The sound of rain began again, soft, hesitant drops against the roof. The twins, now in pajamas, were sitting on the floor, drawing with colored pencils Sophie had brought. Emma held up a picture to Ethan. A man in a blue uniform, a dog beside him, and 2 girls holding his hands under a big umbrella. She grinned shyly. "That's you, Mr. Ethan." Ethan felt something shift inside him, a strange, fragile warmth he hadn't known since his wife's death. He crouched beside her and whispered, "Then I guess I'll have to make sure that umbrella never breaks." Later, after the girls had fallen asleep, Sophie sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea. "You know she'll come after you," she said quietly. "I know," Ethan answered, "but she picked the wrong man to scare." Sophie smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who's been scared before." He didn't reply. His eyes drifted to the window, where Ranger lay outside beneath the porch light, his golden eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "We all have," he said at last. Outside, thunder rolled again, distant but promising. The storm wasn't over. It had only changed form. But inside that small house in Cedar Hollow, something had begun to burn quietly beneath the cold. A flicker of trust, fragile but alive. The following morning dawned gray and still, the kind of silence Cedar Hollow only knew after a storm. Mist hung over the valley like a veil, curling between the pine trees and rooftops. Ethan Cole stood by the window, coffee growing cold in his hand, watching raindrops slide down the glass. Behind him, Ranger lay at the foot of the couch, tail thumping lazily against the floor, as the 2 girls ate breakfast with Sophie at the kitchen table. For the first time since the night he found them, the house smelled of something gentle, toast, honey, and laughter. Emma was giggling, holding a spoon up to her face, pretending to be a pirate. Lily, ever the quiet twin, corrected her with the calm authority of someone far older than 9. "Pirates don't eat oatmeal, silly." Sophie smiled faintly as she poured more milk into their bowls. She looked better today, less pale, though still thin from long months of uncertainty. Her dark hair, brushed back in a low braid, caught the soft morning light. She had a way of moving quietly, never taking up too much space, as if afraid to disturb peace once she'd finally found it. Ethan turned toward them. "You 3 make this house feel different," he said simply. Sophie looked up. "Different good or different bad?" "Good," he replied after a pause. It's been a while since there was any kind of laughter here. Before anyone could answer, a knock echoed from the front door. Ranger rose immediately, posture alert, tail stiff. Ethan approached, hand instinctively resting near his holster, and opened the door. Standing there was a tall man in his mid-40s, dressed in a brown trench coat and fedora dripping rainwater. His name was Harold Denton, a lawyer from Helena representing Victoria Hale. Harold was the kind of man who smelled faintly of expensive tobacco and quiet arrogance. He had narrow eyes, a thin mouth that rarely smiled, and a voice smooth enough to sound polite but sharp enough to draw blood. "Officer Cole," Harold greeted, his tone formal. "I'm here on behalf of Mrs. Hale. She wishes to retrieve her daughters immediately. The court will soon issue an order confirming her custodial rights." Ethan stepped into the doorway, blocking his view of the living room. "The girls are under temporary protective custody, pending investigation. You know that." "Perhaps," Harold replied, brushing rain off his coat sleeve. "But my client insists their removal was unlawful. If you continue to withhold them, you'll be violating state procedure." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then tell your client to file through proper channels instead of sending her hounds to my doorstep." Behind him, Sophie appeared, her expression steady but wary. "The children are safe here. Tell her to leave them be." Harold's gaze flicked to her belly, his brows lifting slightly. "Ah, the former housekeeper, still meddling in your employer's affairs, I see." His voice dripped disdain. "You were dismissed for insubordination, if I recall." Ethan's voice came out low, controlled. "You're done here." Harold smirked. "You can't protect them forever, officer." He tipped his hat and walked back into the rain. When the door shut, Sophie exhaled shakily. "He'll twist everything." "He'll try," Ethan said, "but I've dealt with worse snakes than him." Later that afternoon, they went to the hospital for follow-up exams. The girls were nervous, clinging to Sophie's hands as they entered the pale hallways smelling of antiseptic. The attending physician, Dr. Robert Allen, was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair. He had treated half the town's families for 20 years and carried the calm patience of someone who had seen both birth and death in the same room. He examined the twins gently, speaking softly to distract them from the cold instruments. When he finished, he sighed, removing his glasses. "No new injuries," he said quietly to Ethan, "but the bruises on their backs and shoulders. Those aren't from simple falls. Some are at least a few weeks old." Ethan's expression darkened. "Can you document that officially?" Dr. Allen nodded. "Already did. But you should know, people like Victoria Hale don't go down quietly. She's influential. If you go after her, be ready." "I've been ready since the night I saw those bruises," Ethan said. In the waiting area, Ranger sat obediently by the entrance, drawing curious glances from patients passing by. Emma had taken to brushing his fur with her fingers, while Lily fed him bits of granola from her pocket. Even in the sterile hospital air, there was something grounding about the dog, his steady breathing, his quiet strength. Sophie watched the three of them with a look that mixed sorrow and awe. "He makes them feel safe," she said softly. "He makes everyone feel safe," Ethan replied. "Sometimes I think he's the only reason I still know what that feels like." As evening fell, the rain began again, thin and cold. On the drive home, the windshield wipers kept rhythm with Ethan's thoughts. He couldn't shake the image of the lawyer's smug face, nor the weight of the doctor's warning. The girls had fallen asleep in the back seat, heads resting on each other, while Ranger lay curled at their feet. Sophie stared out the window, watching streetlights flicker across puddles. When they reached the house, Ethan parked in silence. He turned off the engine, but didn't move. Finally, he said, "You knew she was like that, didn't you? Victoria." Sophie hesitated. "I did, but no one believed me. I reported it once. The agency told me I was exaggerating, that the Hales were respected donors." Ethan looked at her, his eyes softening. "That why she fired you?" Sophie nodded. "That, and because I gave Emma a doll when she broke down crying. Victoria said I was encouraging weakness." Ranger let out a small growl, as if echoing Ethan's disgust. He reached down to pat the dog's head. "Then we'll make them listen now." Inside, the girls stirred awake, sleepy but smiling. Sophie led them upstairs to change into pajamas while Ethan reviewed paperwork at his desk. Outside, rain tapped against the window like a heartbeat. When he finally looked up, he saw Sophie standing in the doorway, holding a blanket. "They're asleep," she said quietly. "They asked if they can stay tomorrow, too." "They can stay as long as they need," Ethan replied. For a moment, neither moved. The space between them was filled with unspoken things. The exhaustion of two people who'd both spent too many nights fighting storms alone. Sophie shifted slightly as if to say something, but Ranger's sudden bark broke the silence. Ethan frowned and went to the window. A black car idled across the street, headlights off. He could barely make out the silhouette of a man sitting inside. The engine purred for a few seconds, then the car pulled away into the mist. "Someone watching?" Sophie asked, tense. "Probably Denton," Ethan muttered, "trying to scare us. Is it working?" He looked at her and managed a faint smile. "Not yet." Later, when the house was finally quiet, Ethan sat on the porch steps, rain dripping from the eaves. Ranger rested beside him, chin on his boots. He stared into the darkness, feeling the chill seep through his jacket, but not caring. Inside, Sophie had left a cup of tea on the table, a small gesture, but it carried warmth that words couldn't. He lifted it, sipping slowly. Somewhere upstairs, a door creaked open, and Lily's small voice whispered down, "Mr. Ethan?" He looked up. "Yeah, sweetheart? Are we safe now?" Ethan swallowed hard before answering. "Yes, you're safe." She nodded, satisfied, and disappeared back into the dim hallway. Ethan turned to Ranger. "We'll keep it that way," he murmured. The dog raised his head slightly, as if acknowledging the vow. The rain continued, steady and endless, washing the world clean one drop at a time. For now, it was enough. Cedar Hollow's autumn deepened into a brittle chill, the kind that painted the mountains pale gray and sent fog sliding through the valleys like a restless ghost. At dawn, Officer Ethan Cole woke to the faint smell of pine smoke and wet earth drifting through the open window. He'd slept lightly, half dreaming of distant engines and unseen eyes watching from across the street. Ranger stirred at his feet, one ear twitching, the sound of steady breathing filling the room. Down the hall came a small laugh. Emma's. Then Sophie's gentle voice followed, low and soothing, like a melody barely remembered. For the first time in years, Ethan's house no longer felt like a station between storms. It felt alive. By the time he stepped into the kitchen, Sophie had already made breakfast. She wore a faded flannel shirt rolled at the sleeves, her hair still damp from washing, twisted loosely at her neck. The simple domesticity startled him more than gunfire ever could. He'd lived years in silence, sustained by duty, not warmth. Yet here was warmth in the form of pancakes on chipped plates, and two girls whispering secrets over syrup. Sophie looked up when he entered. "Morning, officer." He shook his head faintly. "You can just call me Ethan." Her lips curved. "Ethan, then." Lily handed him a crumpled piece of paper. On it, drawn with colored pencils, was a picture of Ranger standing in front of their little house with 4 stick figures behind him. "That's our team," she said proudly. Ethan smiled. "Looks like Ranger got promoted." Ranger, hearing his name, lifted his head and wagged his tail lazily. The moment of calm broke when the phone rang, a sharp official tone that made Sophie flinch. Ethan answered. Captain Miriam's voice came through urgent. "Cole, we got a situation. A warrant just came in. Victoria Hale's lawyer filed a formal injunction. She's demanding visitation rights until the custody hearing." Ethan's voice hardened. "Visitation? Already?" "She's moving fast," Miriam said, "but the judge allowed 1 supervised meeting. I'm assigning you to oversee it, neutral location, tomorrow afternoon." He clenched his jaw. "Understood." When he hung up, Sophie read his expression before he spoke. "She's not giving up." "No," Ethan replied, "and she's clever enough to use the law as her weapon." Sophie went quiet, then asked softly, "Do we have to bring them?" "Yes, but not alone. I'll be there. So will Ranger." That afternoon, Ethan drove to the police station to collect the visitation paperwork. The lobby buzzed with voices, officers trading stories, the smell of coffee and rain-damp uniforms filling the air. At the front desk sat Officer Ben Harper, a younger colleague in his early 30s, wiry build, bright grin, and too much curiosity for his own good. Harper had grown up in Cedar Hollow, raised by his grandmother after his parents' divorce. It had made him kind but restless, forever chasing someone else's approval. "You're turning your place into a daycare now, huh?" Harper teased as Ethan signed the forms. "Careful," Ethan said dryly. "I might start charging you for babysitting if you keep showing up late on shift." Harper laughed, but his tone softened. "I saw the report. Those girls... rough stuff, man. You're doing the right thing." As Ethan left, he caught a glimpse of a figure near the bulletin board, a woman in a beige coat, her face half hidden under a scarf. When she turned, he recognized her instantly. Victoria Hale. She looked different, colder somehow, her beauty sharpened into something brittle. Her red lipstick was too bright against her pale skin, her eyes the same steely green as the frozen lake that bordered the town. "Officer Cole," she greeted with icy politeness. "I assume you've been briefed about tomorrow." "I have," he said evenly. "I only want to see my daughters. Surely you can understand a mother's concern." He met her gaze. A mother's concern doesn't usually involve bruises. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed. "Careful what you imply. In this town, words echo farther than truth." He turned to leave, but she added quietly, "You think you've saved them? You're just teaching them to fear someone new." He paused, jaw tightening, then walked out without answering. The next day arrived shrouded in drizzle. The meeting was held at the Cedar Hollow Community Center, a small red brick building that smelled of chalk dust and disinfectant. Ethan arranged the chairs in a circle while Ranger paced nearby, nails clicking on the floor. Sophie arrived with the twins, their small hands clutching her coat. The girls were quiet, their eyes wide with the kind of memory that doesn't fade easily. When Victoria entered, perfume preceding her, the air grew heavy. She was dressed impeccably, her hair pinned, her posture regal, but her eyes betrayed her, tired, hollow, desperate to control something already slipping away. "Lily, Emma," she said with rehearsed gentleness. "You've grown." Neither child moved. Emma buried her face against Sophie's side, while Lily only whispered, "We didn't grow much." Ethan kept his voice steady. "Mrs. Hale, this is a supervised session. You'll speak calmly, no physical contact unless they approach you." Victoria forced a brittle smile. "Of course." The meeting lasted 20 minutes. Victoria spoke softly at first, then with increasing urgency, trying to coax them with promises, new toys, vacations, forgiveness. But the girls stayed silent. Finally, Victoria's composure cracked. "Do you think he can love you like I did?" she demanded. "He doesn't know you. He's using you to feel noble." "Enough," Ethan said sharply. Ranger rose beside him, hackles lifting. Victoria turned her fury on Sophie. "And you, playing savior again, always pretending to care so someone will keep you." Sophie's face remained calm, though her hands trembled. "They don't need perfection," she said softly. "They just need peace." When it was over, Victoria stormed out, her heels echoing down the hallway. Ethan exhaled slowly, tension draining from his shoulders. Lily turned to him, voice small. "Are we in trouble again?" He knelt to meet her gaze. "No, sweetheart. You're safe." Outside, the rain had turned heavier, streaking down the windows. As they stepped into the parking lot, Sophie noticed a car parked across the street. Black sedan, engine running. Ethan followed her gaze. "Denton again," he muttered. "He's making sure she's not alone." "Or making sure we're afraid," Sophie said quietly. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat in his armchair, the soft hum of rain and Ranger's breathing filling the room. On the table lay a folder, Victoria's custody appeal, filed that afternoon. His phone buzzed with a message from Captain Miriam. "Stay alert. Things are moving faster than expected." He closed the folder and looked toward the hallway where Sophie had tucked the twins into bed. A faint light glowed under their door. For a moment, he allowed himself to believe that maybe peace wasn't a place, but a moment. A fragile one, like a single flame against the storm. In the corner, Ranger lifted his head, ears twitching at a sound outside. Ethan rose quietly, gun at his side, and peeked through the curtain. The black car was gone. Only rain remained. The next morning in Cedar Hollow broke gray and damp, the kind of morning that felt neither day nor night. Fog rolled low through the valley, curling around fence posts and old barns, swallowing the sound of tires on wet asphalt. Inside, Ethan Cole's house, the smell of rain mixed with the faint aroma of coffee. Sophie stood at the counter, quietly pouring hot water over tea leaves, her sleeves rolled up. Her hands were steady, but her eyes, those soft gray-blue eyes, were shadowed from another sleepless night. She kept glancing toward the window, half expecting the black sedan to return. Ethan entered the kitchen, still in his uniform. His hair was damp, combed back, his eyes rimmed with the exhaustion of too many half-dreams. Ranger padded behind him, tail swishing softly, amber eyes alert, even in stillness. "You should rest," Sophie said without turning. "So should you," he replied. "You haven't stopped since yesterday." She smiled faintly. "Mothers don't rest when children are afraid." He hesitated. "You're not their mother." "I didn't say I was," she said quietly and went back to stirring her tea. Lily and Emma appeared a moment later, their hair messy from sleep, clutching Ranger's ears like they were handrails. "Is she coming again?" Emma asked, eyes wide. "Not today," Ethan said, "but we're going somewhere safe for a while." That somewhere was a small cabin on the outskirts of town, owned by Ethan's friend Tom Hargrove, a retired forest ranger in his 60s. Tom was tall, broad-shouldered, with a white beard that framed a face perpetually creased in good humor. Years in the wild had turned him into part mountain, part myth. He lived simply, kept a few horses, and trusted dogs more than people. "You sure about this, Cole?" he asked as Ethan unloaded bags from the patrol car. "You're making waves bringing those kids out here. Folks talk." "Let them," Ethan said. "They'll be safe with you if I need to work late." Tom looked over his shoulder at Sophie, who was helping the girls down. "And her? You trust her too?" Ethan's answer was simple. "I do." Inside, the cabin smelled of pine and old leather. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm flickers across wooden walls hung with maps and antlers. Ranger circled the room, once before settling near the fire, sighing contentedly. The girls followed his lead, sitting cross-legged on the rug. Sophie knelt beside them, brushing damp hair from their faces. For a brief, suspended moment, everything felt untouched by the world outside. Tom poured Ethan a cup of black coffee and sat opposite him. "You planning to take Hale to court?" "I already am," Ethan said. "But she's got lawyers and money. I've got evidence, but it's not enough yet." Tom chuckled grimly. "Evidence never beats influence. You'll need witnesses, good ones." Ethan nodded. "That's why I brought Sophie. She saw everything?" Tom's brows furrowed. "She's expecting, isn't she?" Ethan blinked, surprised. "How did you—" Tom smirked. "Boy, I've been around long enough to tell when a woman moves careful. That's a heavy load for someone already carrying ghosts." While the men talked, outside the cabin the fog began to thin, revealing the rolling hills of Cedar Hollow's outskirts, mossy, rain-drenched, alive with the faint hum of wind through pines. The girls explored near the fence, giggling, while Ranger trotted beside them, always keeping a watchful distance. Sophie stood on the porch, watching them. For a heartbeat, she let herself smile fully. Then, from the winding road below, an engine roared. Ethan turned sharply, stepping out onto the porch. A black SUV climbed the hill, its windows tinted. His gut tightened. "Inside," he said quickly. Sophie gathered the girls as Tom fetched his rifle from the mantel. The SUV slowed but didn't stop. A camera flash blinked once from the passenger window. Then the car rolled on, disappearing into the fog. "Reporters," Ethan muttered. "Denton's feeding them lies." Sophie clenched her fists. "He's trying to break you down." "Let him try." That evening, as the cabin grew quiet, Tom cooked stew over the fire while Sophie helped the girls write in small notebooks, a therapy exercise recommended by Dr. Allen. "Write what makes you feel safe," she told them softly. Lily scribbled for a long time before showing hers. "When the rain falls and Ranger sleeps by the door." Emma said simply, "When Miss Sophie holds my hand." Sophie folded the papers gently, her eyes glistening. Later, after the girls fell asleep, Ethan stepped outside. The fog had lifted completely, leaving a clear sky dotted with stars. Ranger lay at his feet, ears twitching. "You ever think about leaving, old boy?" Ethan murmured. The dog tilted his head, as if asking where would we go. Ethan sighed. "Yeah, me neither." He didn't hear Sophie until she was beside him, her cardigan wrapped tight around her. "You're thinking too loud," she said softly. "Can't help it. Tomorrow the hearing gets scheduled. If the judge sides with her—" "She won't," Sophie said firmly. "Not if truth still matters." Ethan looked at her then. Really looked. The firelight from inside painted her face in gold and shadow, and for the first time he saw not just a survivor, but a woman who refused to let the past define her. "You have too much faith in people," he said. "And you have too little," she replied, smiling sadly. The next day the peace broke again. While Ethan drove into town to meet with Captain Miriam, Sophie stayed behind with Tom and the children. Around noon, Tom left for the stables, and Sophie was helping the girls with lunch when Ranger suddenly stood, ears erect, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Sophie froze. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. Outside, gravel crunched under tires. Then came footsteps, heavy, measured. Sophie peeked through the curtain. A man in a dark raincoat stood near the porch, face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He carried a clipboard. When she opened the door, a crack, he flashed a badge. "Child Welfare Division," he said curtly. "I'm here to perform a welfare check on the minors under Officer Cole's custody." He was tall and lean, maybe in his 50s, with thinning hair and a face carved from disapproval. His name badge read, Peter Langley. He had the sort of expression that had forgotten how to smile. Sophie hesitated. "Ethan isn't here." "That's fine," he said, stepping forward. "I just need to ensure the children are being properly supervised." Ranger blocked the doorway, growling. Sophie placed a calming hand on his head. "They're safe," she said firmly. Langley's gaze flicked to her stomach before settling back on her face. "You're the housekeeper, correct?" "I'm the caregiver," she replied evenly. He wrote something on his clipboard. "I'll note that." Lily and Emma appeared behind her, clutching each other. "Are we in trouble?" Emma asked. Langley's face softened slightly, but only for a second. "No, sweetheart. Just routine procedure." He walked through the living room, taking in every detail, the toys neatly stacked, the blankets folded, the soft snore of Ranger as he watched his every move. "Everything seems in order," he finally said. "Tell Officer Cole I'll be in touch." When he left, Sophie's knees nearly gave out. Ranger nuzzled her hand, his warm nose grounding her back to the present. "Good boy," she whispered, hugging him tightly. That evening, Ethan returned. She told him everything. His face went pale. "Langley's no ordinary inspector," he said grimly. "He's Denton's contact in state welfare." Sophie's breath caught. "So it wasn't random." "No," Ethan said. "It's war." He sank into the chair, burying his face in his hands. For the first time, Sophie saw him falter. Not the steady officer, but the man underneath, weary and afraid of failing the children who trusted him. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone," she said softly. He lifted his head, meeting her gaze. "That's what scares me," he murmured. "Because if they hurt you too—" "They won't," she said, her voice quiet but certain. "They can't hurt what's already been through the storm." Ranger let out a low sigh and rested his head on Ethan's knee. The firelight flickered across their faces, the soldier, the survivor, and the guardian dog, bound by something stronger than law or blood. The will to protect. Outside, the fog thickened again, curling against the cabin walls like a warning. The storm wasn't over. It had just changed shape. The storm returned 2 nights later, louder and heavier, like the mountain sky had finally decided to roar. Rain lashed against the roof of Tom Hargrove's cabin, seeping through the edges of the old shutters. The pines outside bent in the wind, their branches scraping the window panes like restless fingers. Inside, a dim light from the fireplace flickered over the room, illuminating Ethan Cole's weary face as he pored over a stack of files on the table. The lines of exhaustion around his eyes had deepened, but so had his resolve. Beside the fire, Sophie sat mending Lily's torn sleeve, her hands moving slowly, rhythmically. The girls were asleep in the small room upstairs, with Ranger stationed by their door, like a sentinel carved from muscle and loyalty. Tom emerged from the back room, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. His beard glistened with droplets from his brief step outside to check the horses. "She's pushing harder," he said, nodding toward the papers. "Heard on the radio that her lawyer filed a new claim, slander and defamation. Claims you've been spreading lies about her." Ethan gave a short, bitter laugh. "Truth's always defamation to the guilty." Tom poured himself coffee, then leaned against the counter. "You're fighting a woman with deep pockets and friends in every office. You sure this is about justice, not guilt?" Ethan looked up sharply. "Guilt?" Tom shrugged. "You couldn't save your wife, and now you're trying to make up for it through these kids. Just make sure you're not drowning to save someone who already knows how to swim." Sophie stopped sewing, her voice quiet but steady. "They don't know how to swim, Tom. Not yet. And he's the only one teaching them." Before anyone could reply, a loud knock cut through the wind. Ranger's ears pricked, and he let out a low, warning growl. Ethan rose instantly, hand on his sidearm. "Who would come here in this weather?" Tom muttered, grabbing his lantern. Ethan opened the door just enough to see a figure standing in the downpour, hooded, soaked to the bone. "Please!" a voice gasped. "I'm looking for Officer Cole." The woman stepped inside, dripping water onto the floor. She pulled down her hood, revealing a sharp, thin face and long black hair plastered to her cheeks. She looked to be in her late 20s, her uniform half hidden under her raincoat. One of the new clerks from the Cedar Hollow courthouse. "I'm Clara Jensen," she said breathlessly, "from the county office. They told me to find you before morning." Her fingers trembled as she handed Ethan a sealed envelope. "Judge Harlan moved your custody hearing up. It's tomorrow. They've changed the location. Helena." Helena was 3 hours away in good weather. Ethan's brow furrowed. "Tomorrow? That's impossible. They can't just—" "They did," Clara said, interrupting softly. "Mrs. Hale's lawyers pressured. The court. She's arguing emergency custody due to psychological manipulation and abduction." Sophie's face went pale. "Abduction? How can they twist it that way?" Clara's expression softened. "That woman can twist sunlight into shadow if it suits her. But—" She hesitated, glancing at Ethan. "I thought you should know. Judge Harlan owes her father a favor. If she gets there first, she'll win." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then we'll get there before she does." Tom stepped forward. "Not in this storm. You won't. The mountain pass will be flooded by midnight." "I don't have a choice," Ethan said, already pulling on his coat. Clara lingered by the door, shivering. Tom offered her a towel. "You drove up here in this?" She gave a tired smile. "I grew up in this town. When it rains, I drive better than I breathe." As Ethan gathered the documents, Sophie followed him to the door. "You can't drive in this," she said. "Let Tom take you in the morning." "If I wait, it'll be over," he replied. "She'll take them, Sophie." "Then I'm coming with you." He shook his head. "You can't. The girls need you here." Ranger barked, stepping forward as if sensing the rising tension. Sophie bent and rubbed the dog's head. "Watch them, boy," she whispered. "Don't let anyone in." Ranger gave a low whine, reluctant to let Ethan go. Tom handed over his truck keys. "Take mine. Heavy tires, full tank." "Thanks," Ethan said. "If I'm not back by dawn, keep them safe." Tom nodded grimly. "You have my word." The drive to Helena was a battle against the storm itself. Rain hammered the windshield, and the wipers squealed in protest. The headlights barely cut through the darkness. Ethan gripped the wheel, jaw tight, eyes burning with fatigue. Clara sat beside him, her flashlight illuminating court files spread across her lap. "You've made enemies, Officer Cole," she said quietly. "I've had worse," he muttered. She studied him for a moment. "Why risk everything? You could hand the girls over until the hearing. It'd look better on paper." "Because I've seen what paper looks like after someone's buried," he said. His tone silenced her. By the time they reached Helena, dawn was bleeding into the sky, pale and cold. The courthouse loomed like a gray monolith, its steps slick with rain. Inside, the air smelled of polish and damp wool. Ethan and Clara were soaked through, but they walked with purpose. The hearing was short. Too short. Victoria arrived moments later, pristine and calm, surrounded by her lawyers like a queen entering her court. She wore black this time, her hair coiled in perfection, her eyes bright with triumph. Judge Harland, a heavy-set man in his 60s with thinning white hair and a face carved from fatigue, presided over the case. He listened to both sides with the detached patience of someone counting minutes until lunch. When Victoria's lawyer presented falsified documents, medical reports claiming Lily suffered from emotional instability due to Ethan's influence, Ethan's stomach twisted. He rose, voice steady but tight. "Those are fabricated. I can prove it." Victoria smiled sweetly. "Then do, officer." Ethan reached into his file and pulled out a small USB drive. "This contains testimony from Dr. Allen, their physician, confirming the real injuries were sustained under Mrs. Hale's supervision." The judge glanced between them, then sighed. "Both claims are serious. I'll need verification." Victoria leaned forward. "And until then," Harlan hesitated, "temporary custody remains with Mrs. Hale." The gavel fell. Ethan's world went silent. Clara placed a hand on his arm, her voice a whisper. "We can appeal." But he didn't move. Across the room, Victoria gathered her papers, her victory polite and venomous. "You fought well," she said, "but you should know. I never lose what's mine." Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Ethan stood on the courthouse steps, drenched again, watching her car vanish into the fog. Clara's voice trembled beside him. "She's taking them tonight." "Not if I get there first," he said. Back at the cabin, Sophie awoke to the sound of Ranger growling. She rushed to the window. Headlights appeared through the trees, 2 sets. Not Ethan's truck. The storm had finally passed, but the danger hadn't. She grabbed the shotgun Tom kept by the door, her heart pounding. The children stirred upstairs, whispering. "It's okay," Sophie said, voice shaking. "Stay with Ranger." Outside, 2 silhouettes stepped from the car, flashlights cutting through the mist. The sound of the iron gate creaking open echoed through the valley. Wind raced down from the mountains, dragging the mist with it like torn silk. The old iron gate at the end of Tom Hargrove's drive moaned and rattled, echoing through the valley. Sophie stood on the porch, both hands gripping the shotgun, heart pounding against her ribs. Behind her, faint footsteps scurried on the wooden floor, Lily and Emma whispering upstairs, their voices shaking. Ranger's low growl vibrated through the floorboards as his eyes locked on the moving shadows beyond the gate. The first man appeared under the beam of the porch light. He was tall, heavy-set, wrapped in a dark raincoat that clung to his shoulders like oilskin. His beard was coarse, gray streaking through black, and his eyes carried the cold stillness of someone who had stopped caring long ago. "Evening, ma'am," he called, voice gruff but falsely polite. "We're here for the children." Sophie steadied her aim, but didn't fire. "Who sent you?" He smirked. "The law, or something close enough." Another man stepped out of the second vehicle, younger, thinner, wearing a baseball cap and gloves too clean for farm work. His name tag, barely visible under the flashlight, read Dean Croft. "We got orders," he said flatly. "Custody retrieval, 2 minors, female." Ranger barked sharply, fur bristling. The younger man flinched. The older one, clearly in charge, raised a hand. "Tell your dog to stand down, lady. We're just doing our job." Sophie's voice trembled but held steady. "Show me the papers." The older man chuckled. "Papers don't survive rain, sweetheart." He took a slow step forward, boots squelching in the mud. Behind Sophie, Tom's heavy footsteps sounded on the stairs. He emerged carrying his rifle, eyes narrow and calm. Tom was not a man easily startled. Decades in the wild had taught him patience and timing. His gray beard glistened under the porch light. "You picked the wrong property to trespass on," he said evenly. The older man's grin faltered. "We don't want trouble." Tom's voice stayed level. "Then turn around and drive away. You've got 10 seconds before I stop counting." For a tense moment, the rain filled the silence. Then the older man spat to the side. "You'll regret this," he muttered. He motioned to his partner, and the two retreated to the car. But, before getting in, the younger one glanced back at Sophie, his face half hidden in shadow. "She's gonna come herself next time," he said softly, "and she won't knock." As their taillights disappeared down the winding road, Sophie lowered the shotgun. Her hands were trembling now, the adrenaline catching up. Tom gently took the weapon from her. "You did good," he said. "You didn't blink." Sophie exhaled shakily. "They'll be back." Tom nodded. "Yeah, that's why we'll be ready." Upstairs, Lily and Emma huddled by the window, staring at the rain. "Miss Sophie?" Lily whispered. "Was that her?" Sophie knelt beside them, brushing damp strands of hair from their faces. "No, sweetheart," she said softly. "That wasn't her, but she sent them." Emma buried her face against Sophie's shoulder. "Why does she hate us?" Sophie hesitated, eyes filling with tears she didn't let fall. "Because some people don't know how to love without hurting. But we're not like them, are we?" Both girls shook their heads. Sophie kissed their foreheads. "That's right. We're going to break that chain." Downstairs, Tom made a call from the landline. "Cole, it's me. They came." Ethan's voice, faint through the static of the mountain connection, hardened instantly. "Who?" "Two men, said they were from welfare, no papers. They left, but I doubt it's over." Ethan cursed under his breath. "Keep the lights low. Don't open the door for anyone. I'm 2 hours out." The call ended. Tom replaced the receiver and poured himself a measure of whiskey from the old bottle he kept for bad nights. He handed the glass to Sophie. "You'll need this more than me." She shook her head. "I need to stay clear." He studied her, the curve of her shoulders, the way she stood half in light, half in shadow. "You remind me of my wife," he said quietly. "Stubborn, brave, never backed down from a fight she didn't start." "What happened to her?" Sophie asked. He stared into the fire. "Cancer took her quick. Bravery doesn't always win, but it does leave a mark." They sat in silence until headlights appeared once more on the horizon. Tom stiffened, hand going to his rifle. But this time, it was Ethan's truck grinding up the hill, mud splattering the fenders. Ranger barked once, joyful, and ran out to meet him. Ethan barely had the engine off before he was on the porch. His clothes were soaked, his face pale from exhaustion. "Everyone all right?" Sophie nodded, though her voice was hoarse. "They came with no warrant. Tom scared them off." Ethan's eyes softened with gratitude. "You did good," he said. Then, glancing toward the dark tree line, his tone hardened again. "She's escalating." Later, when the girls were asleep, Ethan sat by the fire with Sophie. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke. "The judge gave her temporary custody. I couldn't stop it." Sophie's expression didn't change, but her eyes flicked toward the stairs where the girls slept. "Then we keep them hidden until we can prove she's unfit." Ethan hesitated. "That would make me a criminal." She met his gaze. "Then let's both be criminals for the right reason." Ranger stirred, rising suddenly. His ears pricked, gaze fixed on the window. Ethan followed his line of sight. Across the valley, faint headlights moved again, this time slower, deliberate. Ethan crossed to the table, pulled his pistol from its holster, and checked the chamber. "She's not waiting for courts anymore." Tom entered with his rifle. "I'll take the back." The night stretched taut as wire. Rain drummed against the roof, steady and relentless. They waited, but the lights disappeared before reaching the gate. Only silence followed. Tom lowered his weapon, frowning. "Maybe they're testing us, seeing who's home." Ethan exhaled, rubbing his temples. "It's a game to them." Sophie rose and placed a hand on his arm. "Then we stopped playing by their rules." By dawn, the storm had eased. The valley was silvered with fog again. Ethan stood by the porch, watching the clouds drift between the pines. The world looked peaceful, almost indifferent to the chaos of the night before. Sophie joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "You think she'll try again?" "She will," Ethan said quietly. "But next time, she'll come herself." Sophie nodded. "Then she'll find out what real mothers look like." Ranger leaned against Ethan's leg, eyes scanning the road below. The sun broke weakly through the clouds, streaking the wet ground with gold. It was the first light after the storm, fragile, trembling, but still there. Ethan turned to Sophie, his voice low. "We'll fight her in court, on the road, or in the rain if we have to, but I won't let her take them again." And deep inside the house, Two little girls slept soundly for the first time since they'd been found, unaware that the world outside their dreams was already preparing for the next war. The morning after the storm was strangely bright. The valley glistened under a thin film of dew, the scent of wet pine heavy in the air. The old cabin looked almost peaceful again, smoke curling from the chimney like a fragile promise of safety. But Ethan Cole knew better. He stood on the porch with Ranger at his side, scanning the horizon. The dog's ears were up, tail stiff, eyes fixed on the dirt road that wound through the forest. Ethan's hand rested absently on the fur between Ranger's shoulders. "Easy, boy," he murmured, though the tension in his jaw betrayed his own unease. Inside, Sophie was packing quietly, not in panic, but with precision. She folded the girls' clothes into small bundles, her movements brisk and controlled. Her face, normally soft with warmth, was pale under the morning light. Every few minutes, her eyes flicked toward the window, listening for sounds only she seemed to hear. She'd barely slept, haunted by the echo of last night's knocking and the memory of the men's voices at the gate. Tom Hargrove sat at the table sharpening his hunting knife, his big hands moving with slow deliberation. The old ranger looked more serious than usual, his easy humor replaced by the cold focus of a man who'd spent years watching storms come and go, and who knew when one wasn't finished. "You can't stay here much longer," he said quietly. "They'll come back with real papers next time." Ethan nodded, staring at the map spread out on the table. His voice was low, measured. "There's an old ranger outpost on the North Ridge, empty since '09. I can move them there until the appeal goes through." Tom frowned. "That road's rough. You'll have to cross the creek trail. Mud'll be deep from the storm." "I'll manage." "You won't be alone," Sophie said, appearing beside them. Her voice carried no hesitation. "If they find this place, I'm not leaving the girls behind again." Ethan looked up, meeting her gaze. "You sure?" She gave a small, tired smile. "You already know the answer." Before he could argue, Ranger let out a low growl and trotted to the door. His fur stood on end. Ethan followed his gaze and froze. A car was climbing the road toward the cabin, not the black SUV from last night, but a dusty sedan with government plates. A woman stepped out as the engine died. She was tall and thin, dressed in a tan trench coat and dark glasses despite the morning sun. Her dark hair was pinned neatly, her movements efficient. She carried an air of authority that immediately filled the clearing. "Officer Cole," she called out. "Agent Nora Miles, State Bureau of Child Services." Ethan stepped off the porch, his voice guarded. "We've already spoken with welfare agents." "I'm not here for an inspection," she replied calmly. "I'm here to warn you." Up close, Nora looked about 40, her face lean and sharp, but not unkind. There was something tired in her eyes, the kind of fatigue that comes from seeing too many broken homes and too many children caught in them. "I don't know what you did to anger Victoria Hale," she said, pulling off her sunglasses, "but she's filed an official kidnapping complaint. She's got half the county believing you're on the run with her stepdaughters." "She's not their mother," Ethan said flatly. "She's got the paperwork to prove otherwise," Nora said. "And more importantly, she's got friends in the Bureau. I can't stop the warrant, but I can delay it. Maybe 24 hours. Sophie stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "Why are you helping us?" Nora hesitated, then said softly, "Because I know her type. My own sister married someone like her. Wealthy, controlling, always finding a way to turn love into leverage. Took her years to escape. Your girls don't deserve that." Tom brought her a cup of coffee. "So, what's your advice, Agent?" "Disappear," Nora said. "Tonight. The minute the sun sets, they'll issue the warrant." She turned to Ethan. "You've got until dawn tomorrow to be somewhere they can't reach." When she left, the valley seemed to darken again. Sophie exhaled shakily. "She's right. We need to go." Ethan nodded, already packing his files. "We'll take the creek trail north. It'll wash our tracks." By dusk, the cabin was quiet. Tom helped load the supplies into Ethan's truck. Canned food, blankets, a lantern, a few gallons of fuel. The girls clung to Sophie, frightened but brave. Lily whispered, "Are we running away?" Sophie knelt down, brushing hair from her face. "No, sweetheart. We're running towards something better." Tom clasped Ethan's hand. You've got good instincts, son. Don't second-guess them now. Ethan managed a faint smile. Thanks for everything, Tom. You can thank me by staying alive, Tom replied gruffly. As the truck rumbled to life, Ranger jumped into the back, tail sweeping side to side. The headlights cut through the mist as they rolled down the dirt path and disappeared into the forest. The drive was long and treacherous, branches clawed at the windshield, and the road turned to mud within miles. Sophie sat in the passenger seat, her hand gripping the dashboard as the truck jolted through the ruts. In the back seat, Lily and Emma huddled under a blanket, fast asleep against each other. Ethan kept his eyes on the narrow road, his jaw set. Once we reach the ridge, there's a footbridge that crosses the creek. After that, we're safe. But when they reached the bridge, it wasn't there. The flood had taken it. The creek below was swollen, rushing black water over sharp rocks. Ethan cursed under his breath. We'll have to cross on foot. It's too dangerous, Sophie protested. Staying is worse. He slung his duffel over one shoulder and climbed down, boots sinking into mud. Ranger followed, barking once as if to say, I'll go first. The dog waded into the shallows, testing the current. Then Ethan turned to Sophie. Hand me Emma first. They crossed slowly, one by one. The water rose to Ethan's knees, then his waist, the current tugging at his legs. Sophie stumbled once, nearly slipping, but Ranger pressed against her side, keeping her upright. When they finally reached the opposite bank, soaked and shivering, Sophie laughed breathlessly. Good boy, she whispered, hugging the dog's wet neck. The outpost was half a mile ahead, an old wooden structure half hidden by fir trees. Inside, it smelled of dust and pine sap. Ethan lit the lantern, casting a soft golden glow. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. The girls huddled near the stove, while Sophie wrung out their clothes and hung them by the fire. Ethan stood by the door, watching the rain start again beyond the trees. We'll stay here tonight, he said. Tomorrow, I'll contact my captain and explain everything. Sophie met his eyes. You still think the law will save us? Ethan's answer was slow. I have to believe something will. Later that night, while the others slept, Ethan stepped outside. The forest was quiet except for the whisper of rain. Ranger stood beside him, head high, nostrils flaring. You hear it too, don't you? Ethan murmured. A faint hum of engines drifted through the trees, distant but growing. He looked back at the cabin, where a single lantern flickered in the window, and whispered to the dog. They found us. The forest was soaked in darkness, the kind that feels alive, whispering, waiting. Ethan Cole crouched near the cabin window, every muscle tight, eyes fixed on the flickering lights moving through the trees. 3 vehicles, creeping slow. Their headlights cut narrow spears through the mist. He didn't need to guess who they were. Victoria Hale had found them. Inside, Sophie was waking the girls, her voice calm but urgent. Sweethearts, you need to stay quiet, okay? We're going to play the silent game. Her hands moved fast, packing a few essentials, wrapping the girls in coats still damp from the rain. Lily looked up, eyes wide. Is she here? Sophie hesitated. Maybe. But you know what? She whispered, brushing Lily's cheek. We have something she doesn't. Courage. Ranger stood by the door, fur bristling, growling low. He was 7 years old, a German shepherd with deep brown eyes and a coat streaked gold and black. There was a scar on his right flank, a reminder of a fight long past, the night he'd saved Ethan from a knife-wielding suspect. His ears flicked toward the approaching sound. He didn't move until Ethan gave the signal. Ethan turned to Sophie. If they reach the porch, take the girls out the back, follow the creek until it forks. You'll find the ranger path. Tom will come. He knows this route. Sophie grabbed his arm. And you? I'll stall them. Her eyes flashed. No, you won't do this alone. He almost smiled. You forget. I've got backup. He nodded at Ranger, who gave a soft bark as if in agreement. Outside, tires crunched on gravel, doors opened, shadows fanned out under flashlights. Ethan slipped his pistol from his holster, safety off. He recognized one of the voices immediately, the older man from the cabin, the one with the gray beard and fake authority. Come out, Cole. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Ethan's jaw tightened. You made it hard when you lied about those warrants. he muttered under his breath. The door rattled, someone testing it. Ranger snarled, and the sound froze them. A moment later, a window shattered at the side. Ethan fired a warning shot. "Next one's not in the wall," he shouted. The men ducked, shouting orders. Through the chaos, he heard her voice, sharp, furious, unmistakable. "Ethan!" Victoria Hale stepped into the clearing like a ghost from a bad dream. She was dressed in a tailored black coat, her blonde hair tied in a severe knot, makeup untouched by rain. Her beauty was as precise as her cruelty. Her eyes, icy blue, unfeeling, fixed on the cabin. "You think you can hide from me?" she hissed. Ethan stepped into the porch light, gun lowered but steady. "Go home, Victoria. This ends here." She smiled, brittle and false. "Oh, it ends here, all right. Hand over my daughters and the woman who poisoned them against me, and maybe I'll let you keep your badge." "They're not your daughters," he said quietly. "They stopped being yours the moment you made them fear rain." Behind him, Sophie appeared, holding Lily and Emma close. Her voice was firm despite her trembling hands. "You don't own them, Victoria. They're not something you can buy back with lies." Victoria's face twisted. "You think they love you? You think they'll ever forget who their real mother is?" "They already have," Sophie said softly. Victoria raised her hand, and from the corner of his eye, Ethan saw the glint of a gun. Everything happened in seconds. A flash, a sound like thunder cracking the sky. Sophie screamed. Ranger lunged forward, faster than thought, knocking Ethan aside as the bullet split the air. The dog's snarl cut through the night. Then a second shot rang out. Ranger fell. For a moment, time broke. Ethan dropped to his knees beside him. "Ranger, no." The dog's breathing was shallow, eyes clouding, but he still wagged his tail weakly, pressing his paw into Ethan's arm. Outside, Victoria's men hesitated. None of them had expected her to fire. Then the forest erupted in light. Headlights from another direction. Engines revving. Tom's truck barreled up the trail, followed by a second vehicle, Nora Miles's government sedan. She stepped out, flashlight in one hand, badge in the other. "Put the weapon down, Mrs. Hale." Victoria turned, panic flashing for the first time. You work for me." "Not anymore," Nora said coldly. "I saw the real files, the bruises, the forged reports. It's over." Victoria screamed, raw, unhinged, and tried to raise the gun again. But Ethan was already moving. He tackled her, wrenching the weapon from her grip and pinning her to the ground. "You're done," he said, his voice low with fury and grief. "You'll never hurt them again." When the sirens arrived 20 minutes later, Victoria Hale was handcuffed, pale and silent, her empire of lies collapsing around her. Her men were taken away one by one. Rain began to fall again, light, steady, almost cleansing. Inside the cabin, Sophie knelt beside Ranger. His breathing was shallow, eyes half closed. Lily held his paw, whispering, "It's okay, boy. You can rest now." Ethan pressed a hand over the wound, his other hand shaking. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Please." But Ranger only blinked once, a soft sound rumbling in his throat. Not pain, but something like peace. His eyes drifted shut. Sophie placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "He saved you," she said softly. "He saved all of us." Ethan didn't answer. He just nodded, jaw trembling, as he lifted the dog in his arms and carried him out into the rain. They buried Ranger under a tall cedar behind the cabin, where the soil was soft and the air smelled of pine. Tom made a simple wooden marker, carving the name by hand. Nora stood. Beside them, her trench coat soaked, her face solemn. "You'll have full custody now," she told Ethan quietly. The judge signed the emergency order. The girls are safe. Sophie held Lily and Emma close as the rain washed the mud from their boots. The girls cried softly, not from fear this time, but from love. When the last stone was placed, Ethan stood silently, the rain running down his face. "He was the best partner I ever had," he said. "Didn't need words to tell me when something was wrong." Sophie took his hand, her voice trembling. "He did his duty. Now we do ours." Days later, the storm passed. The investigation ended, the charges against Ethan dropped, and Victoria was sent to trial. the old cabin became something else, a home. Tom visited often, bringing wildflowers to place by Ranger's grave. Nora stopped by sometimes too, always with a small smile, saying she just wanted to check the paperwork. But everyone knew she came because she needed to believe there were still good endings. Ethan returned to the precinct eventually, but he worked fewer hours now. In the evenings, he'd drive back up to the mountains, where Sophie and the girls waited. The laughter in that little house became something sacred, a sound that filled every crack left by fear. One spring afternoon, as sunlight poured through the pines, Sophie found Ethan by the porch, fixing the fence. "You still look for trouble?" she teased. "Force of habit," he said, smiling faintly. She knelt beside him, handing him a nail. "You know, Lily says when it rains now, she listens for Ranger's bark in the thunder." Ethan paused, eyes soft. "Maybe she's right. Maybe he's still guarding us." That night, the rain came again, gentle, silver, endless. The girls laughed and danced in it, hands stretched to the sky. Sophie watched from the porch, tears glinting like tiny stars in her eyes. Ethan wrapped his arm around her shoulders, whispering, "We made it through, didn't we?" She nodded. "Because love doesn't run from storms. It walks through them." And beneath the cedar where Ranger lay, the rain fell softly as if heaven itself was whispering its approval. Sometimes, the greatest miracles do not arrive with thunder or light from heaven. They come quietly, through people who choose love when the world offers only cruelty. Ethan found it in the courage to protect. Sophie found it in compassion that asked for nothing. And those two little girls found it in a simple truth. God never forgets the innocent, even in the darkest storm. When we open our hearts to protect, to forgive, and to love, we become the hands through which God still works his wonders every day. Maybe you too have walked through storms. Maybe you too have felt forgotten. But remember, his grace finds you even when you least expect it. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below, tell us where you're watching from, and type Amen if you believe God still sends his angels in the form of ordinary people. May God bless you, your family, and every kind heart that chooses love over fear. And if you wish to keep faith alive, don't forget to subscribe, so together we can keep spreading the light he gave us.